This is the Welcome to Fatherhood podcast. I am your host. My name is Kelly. I am here to remind you, however you're listening, wherever you're listening, that as dads, we're just like moms, except we're dads. Ha.
Hey, would it be okay if I hit my vape real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I know I don't want it to mess up anything. So
Nah,
I want to try to put it down and
what you are listening to is a conversation that's about to start between two strangers.
I know that probably ain't too pleasant of a sound to hear.
Whatever you got to do, man. It is a raw conversation. It is a sincere conversation. It is an honest conversation. And by far, one of the most important conversations that I've had. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us your name, where you're from, and just give us a little sense of your background.
I'm Kyle Kessler. I live in Pike County, Kentucky. I'm 29, and I got a 4-month-old son now, and he's my world.
I like the accent, to be honest with you. Yesterday, I got off the phone, and my wife was listening in the distance, and I was like, "Babe, did you hear that? Did you hear that accent, that twang?" And she's like, "Yeah, I like it."
Well, actually, I'm originally from Ohio, 15 minutes from Columbus.
Really? So you didn't have that?
Yeah.
You didn't have the accent before moving to Kentucky?
No, not at all. And that's my wife tells me all the time. She's like, "I miss your city accent."
Is your wife also from Ohio?
No, she was born and raised here.
Okay. So you didn't have to pick up the accent just so that you could prove your love to her, did you?
No.
And your 4-month-old, what's his name?
Elijah.
Elijah. What was it like, man? What was the pregnancy like? How did you find out you were going to be a dad?
It was an array of emotions for sure. And I honestly thought she was pregnant before she did. I just had that gut feeling. And honestly, man, before she got pregnant with Eli, we had a miscarriage, and it put us both in a very dark place.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, we just quit trying for a while. And I just had that gut feeling she's pregnant. And I just kept telling her, I'm like, "You're pregnant, you're pregnant." And she's like, "I don't know about that." And I ended up going to buying 2 tests, and both of them popped up positive. And we're like, finally.
I appreciate you sharing that because it's not an easy thing to share, particularly with someone whom you've never met before. So it's important so that our listeners know that you and I have never met before. And I'll explain a little bit later down the line how it is that we were able to connect. But I appreciate you sharing that because it's not an easy thing to talk about. When you go through these type of experiences. And I also appreciate the fact that you acknowledged that going through that experience, the miscarriage experience, put you and your wife in a really dark place, because that's what happened with my wife and I as well. We tried twice before our son. And so we went through the experience 2 times. The first time it was okay, I was kind of prepared for it, as weird as that sounds. I was kind of prepared for it. The second time was when it really hit me harder, and not just my wife went to a dark place that time, but I also went to a dark place. So it was one of the most difficult periods of our marriage. But I'm curious to know, how did you and your wife work through it?
Like you said, man, it was probably the darkest days of our marriage, and the only thing that could help us get through it is just knowing that she's our angel and she's watching over us, and like we was just there for each other, and like me and her would talk about it because we don't ever want to forget her. And that was our whole thing. And, like a lot of people was just like kind of just brush it off. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it happens all the time, but it happened to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Not until you said that am I now realizing that it's true. It does happen all the time, but it's not happening to me all the time. It's not happening to you all the time. But the fact that it did happen that one time. So if you don't mind me asking, how far along was your wife?
Well, we went and we found out about the miscarriage at 8 weeks, and we never really got the gender test or anything. Mm-hmm. We just both had that gut feeling that it was a girl, and we was going to name her Aurora. And like we just had so much big plans for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we both lost it in the doctor's office mm-hmm. when they told us. And the one thing that helped me and my wife, honestly, more than probably anything, was we both got matching tattoos. And it was the date we found out, and then like the first doctor's appointment, mm-hmm. it was her heartbeat.
Wow.
And we both said that she'll always be with us.
You know what's crazy about that? Before my wife's second miscarriage, my wife and I had a bet that whenever she got pregnant, I was convinced that my first child was going to be a girl. And she was convinced that our first child was going to be a boy. And so we had a friendly bet of $100. $100 that it was going to be a girl, $100 that it was going to be a boy for her. Prior to the second miscarriage, Kyle, I had 2 dreams that I was holding a baby girl in my hands. And the second dream is the one that I remember the clearest. It's a weird dream because in the dream, I was holding a white baby girl with blue eyes, but I knew that this baby was my daughter. Like in the dream, I was in the delivery room, and I didn't see the delivery. I didn't see my wife. What I remember vividly in the dream was that the doctor came and he placed this girl in my hands, and I looked at her, and I just knew that that was my daughter. And I tell you, man, my heart welled up with so much emotion that I woke up, and my first instinct after waking up was that I almost burst out in tears. That's how happy I was that my girl was in my hands. So I think that's why I took that second miscarriage a lot harder, because just like you, I had that gut feeling that that was gonna be our girl. That was gonna be my girl. And man, I remember going to work the next day after that, just trying to, get my mind off of things. And I told my boss as soon as I got to work, I was like, I don't belong here. I work at a children's hospital. And so as soon as I walked in the hospital, I was like, I can't be here. You know what I mean? Like, I can't be here right now. And I just came home to be with my wife. But we were both hurting, brother. We were both hurting, and I can hear, across the miles, I can hear the quiver in your voice. And I'm assuming that you just shed some tears right now just thinking about that experience. So it's evident that the pain is still there. But I think that what you and your wife did, getting the matching tattoos of her heartbeat, do I get that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's beautiful, man. And one thing that I often tell people that I'm with at the hospital when I go and visit them to try to bring some sense of comfort in their pain is that although the people we have lost are not with us physically, and in the case of your baby girl, Aurora, even at 8 weeks of the gestation period, she had already left such a huge imprint on your life and your wife's life that although she's not physically with you guys, not only do you have her heartbeat marked on your physical bodies, but just the memory of those 8 weeks, I'm sure, is more valuable than anything given the circumstances. So I send out my heart to you and your wife for the loss that you've experienced.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And like, I'm same with you. I know what it feels like, and I couldn't imagine going through it a second time. And just like every time we went to the doctor to check on Elijah, it was in the back of her head, like, could something be wrong?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it really does mess with you.
It does. And that's one of those things that it will stick with you forever, So now that you've had Elijah, let's say you and your wife decide to try to have kids again, even though you have Elijah and he is 4 months old. So, you've gone through the full term of having a healthy baby. It's still going to be in the back of your mind. You know what I mean? What was that?
I said, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, no, I really appreciate you sharing that, because that's one of the areas where I feel like us dads, we're not always prone to admit these type of things. But I think that there's so much strength and power that comes in admitting these hard-hitting moments, in particular a loss this big. And just to put that out there for me to hear, and me putting my story out there for you to hear and to be able to identify with each other, I think that's a really powerful thing. So once again, I thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing that.
Yeah, it ain't no problem, and hopefully, just somebody may listen to it, and we can connect with them, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Describe what the pregnancy process was like for you.
the emotions was just indescribable. And just, I already wanted to pamper my wife. Her name's April. Just wanted to pamper her, and like the whole pregnancy, I wouldn't let her carry even her purse. I'm just like, I want you to take it easy, and just more or less be bed rest the whole time.
Yeah. Were you present in the delivery room with her?
Yes.
So it's
Yeah. So we got. We actually, she had to be induced, and we had to be there like 12 hours before and everything. So like, just the anxiety and everything leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the doctors come in and they're just like checking them and everything. They're like, okay, so everything's going good.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're measuring contractions and all that stuff. And then like all of a sudden they don't even describe anything what's going on. And just like 3 nurses and a doctor rush in, and like they had to connect like wires to his head to get his heartbeat, because they couldn't get his heartbeat through like her belly with the machine and everything.
What?
So at that point, I'm freaking out. Like nobody's saying anything. And my wife's mom was in there with us. She's like, everything's okay. I'm like, I ended up having to take a nerve pill. Like, I honestly thought I was going to have a heart attack. My heart was beating out of my chest so bad. And then, like, they tell her, like, you're crowning. And I'm like, okay, so that's really good. They're like, okay, just push one time and we'll get the doctor in here. And she put in, like, stop, stop, stop. So the doctor comes in, and like she just had to push like one more time, and there he was.
What?
Yeah, like, and man, even with her, like the whole time she was there being induced and like having contractions, like a bunch of our family was there, and she's like, everybody just leave me alone. I'm gonna do my makeup. I want to look good for my pictures.
Wait.
And I guess her just focusing on something like that took her mind off of the pain. And it was honestly the best day of my life. It was amazing.
Ah, man. I can't. So when my wife was at the hospital, we got there. So before I share my part, did Elijah come on his due date, or was it a little bit
He was
sooner?
about a week. It was a little bit sooner. He was a little over a week early.
Okay.
But they thought they wanted to induce her because they was thinking that he was measuring right around like 8 pounds, and he came out 6 pounds 7.1 ounces.
Okay. So yeah, so my son's due date was June 11th, but he came May 26th. And so that morning when my wife's water broke, we ended up at the hospital, and she wasn't having any contractions from the time her water broke to the time we got to the hospital. Even when we got to the hospital, she wasn't having any contractions. But when the resident doctor came to check how many centimeters dilated she was, right after that little test, that's when she started having contractions. And so she was in labor for about 12 hours. But we also had a little scare, and that was because his heart rate was dropping, but the doctors couldn't explain what was causing his heart rate to drop. So I don't know what's wrong with your son and my son, and that they had their heart rates drop, but that's not cool, man, because I remember stepping into the bathroom in the room for like 2 minutes. And in the 2 minutes that I was in there, I hear all these people outside. And I was just like, wait a minute, what is going on? So I hurry up and I get out, and I see like 5 people in there. And they're not giving the impression that there's something wrong. But I work at a hospital, man. I know the look on people's faces when they're not trying to give the impression that something is wrong to patients and their families. So I'm looking at their faces and I'm like, okay, something is definitely not right. And so they're like, did you just move? Did you do this? Did you do that? And my wife is like, no, I've been laying here. She had already had the epidural, so her lower half was numb. She couldn't move her legs or anything like that. So she was like, I can't even move. And that's when they were like, well, his heart rate just dropped and we don't know why it dropped. Anyway, long story short, she had to get a C-section. And from the time that they took her out of the room into the delivery room, and they called me back there, within like 5 minutes, little man was born. It was such a blur. And quite honestly, I remember some of the details, but everything is all jumbled up together. But I just know that when I saw the doctor hold up my son, there's no feeling that could describe that moment. None whatsoever. That was one of the happiest days in my life, man. One of the happiest days in my life by far.
Yeah, and like if you don't care, I'll say something that also helped me and my wife get through and like over the miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying that she likes, it's always darkest just before the light.
Yeah, it's always darkest before the light. I like that. I like that a lot. So now that Elijah is 4 months old, what has the little man taught daddy so far?
All kinds of stuff. But honestly, how to be a better person, I was very impatient before. So he's beginning to teach me patience and how to be a better husband and a better dad. And I mean, just looking at him and getting a reaction from him when you look into his eyes. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that don't melt your heart, I don't know what does.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you say he's beginning to teach you patience and not that you've already become a patient person, because I don't know about you, man. Sometimes I got to put low man down and just walk away. Like, okay, buddy, you're getting on daddy's nerves right now.
Yeah, like I've told my wife, I'm like, okay, I just need a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I lose my cool on little man, I need to walk away. So my son, when he wakes up and he's hungry, he is the most aggressive, impatient little gremlin I have ever met. I mean, he just loses it, bro. He wakes up and he's like, and I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm not the one with the boobs, man. Relax. Like, just let me call mommy so she can hook you up with that. But then he just starts screaming. I'm talking about as if he just woke up to find out that someone killed his entire family type screaming. Like this deep, disturbing. And when we were talking on the phone a little bit yesterday, you heard him scream a little bit. That's why I said little man has some lungs. Like he can scream. And at first, still somewhat to this day, but at first, like the first couple of weeks, Kyle, I got to tell you, man, I could not tolerate that scream because it made, and I'm not an anxious person, anyone who knows me knows that I am the most chill person in the world. If you were to call me and ask me, yo, Kelly, how are you doing? My response to you has always been and will forever be none. I'm chilling. Like, that's just me. I am a chill person. So for me to say that my anxiety was at a 10 every time little men started screaming is a big thing because I'm not an anxious person. But the moment his little tongue curled and his bottom lip started to quiver, and he takes his two arms and balls them up into a fist, and his fist starts to shake and tremble a little bit, and then he just goes, ah! Oh my God. I'm just like, I can't, not right now, buddy. Not right now. Please don't.
Just wait until he starts teething.
Yeah. That is so true. My nephew is teething right now, and he gets so impatient.
Yeah, ours has been like teething for probably about a month now. Like, he has about 4 teeth trying to come in, and I nicknamed him the drool monster because that's all he does is drool. Like, you put an outfit on him and he soaks it. And there's been times, like, we can calm him down, give him like teething rings and stuff like that. Or sometimes he wants to gnaw on your knuckles and stuff like that. But other times you're just like, woo-wee, just calm down, man.
Yeah, like, no matter what you do, he just won't stop crying. That's crazy. Are you enjoying the process of fatherhood?
Yeah, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I love it.
Can you talk a little bit about your own background with your dad?
Yeah. So my dad he was there, but he wasn't there. And I'll get into more detail about that. Mm-hmm. But so he was physically there, but mentally he wasn't because he was on painkillers, Oxycontin, just anything that he could abuse and get high off of. And then eventually that escalated to him using heroin. And I'll just go ahead and share this. Like, it was really messed up seeing him. Like, I still remember vividly, like, it scarred me for life seeing it. Like, he had a big house speaker with like a little tin tray, and he would sit there and snort pills off of it, like right in front of us.
Wow.
And like later in life, he was like, okay, so you want to go for a ride with me and Bear, which was one of his friends. He's passed away now. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, yeah, any teenager at that point, you're thinking, yeah, Dad's wanting something to do with me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm game for it. So he's okay, so we're going to go here, and you can go into White Castle and get you something to eat, and then we'll be back over here in a few minutes. I'm like, okay, this is suspicious. Mm-hmm. In the back of my mind, I knew what was going on. So they're like over across the road in the Kmart parking lot, and like I can see them. Mm-hmm. So I guess they picked up their heroin and all that stuff. And he picks me up. I get in the back seat and everything. And the next thing I know, he pulls out and starts having like a seizure at the stoplight, and the light turns green. Oh. And like his friend is like out of his mind. And the only thing I could do, and I want to say I was like 14, 15 at the time. And the only thing I could do, man, was just jump up front in his lap and go.
What?
And that was probably one of the most scariest experiences I've ever seen, because at that point, like, okay, is my dad dying? I mean, I don't want to get killed, being rear-ended by whatever's coming, But, and I ended up getting like 3 or 4 minutes down the road, and he kind of comes to, and he's like, whoa, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, what the hell? He's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, sorry is not the words you need right now. You need help.
Wow.
And I mean, I know I just went to a very dark place there, but like, so that's what I was meaning when I said like he was physically there, but not mentally there. And like growing up, like he had more to do with me than my sister until he got on drugs. But like I played football and everything, and like through 5 years, he came to one of my games, and
Wow.
like every game, I'd be like, "Dad, or do you want to come? Do you want to come?" "Oh no, I'm too sick." Like me right now, I don't care if I'm on my deathbed and it's going to take everything in me. If my son asks me to do something, I want to do my best to be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is your dad still involved in your life right now? And does he have any, if he is, does he have any rapport with Eli?
No, man, I had to cut him off just because he, I promised him, I was like, "Dad, as long as you stay clean, I will be in your life. But the second you relapse and I find out about it, I'm done
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want it in my life. I don't want it in my wife's life." And that was before we had Eli.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I don't hear from him for a little while and everything. And I'm just kind of getting suspicious at that point because, you know, me and my wife had stayed with him and he was doing great.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I gave him for everything at that point. I'm just like, I'm over it. You know, he's doing good. That's the main thing. So I get a phone call from my older brother. Well, he's actually my half brother. And he goes to tell me, "Dude, Dad's losing it. He's on meth. And like he sold everything in his house for meth. He's getting evicted." I'm just like, "What?" So like he calls me like it's Christmas Day, about 2, maybe 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh, you won't believe what happened to me." I'm like, "What?" So he goes on to make up this big extravagant lie saying that one of his friends brought somebody in and they robbed him and all this. I'm like, "Dad, don't lie to me. Like, I already know what's going on." And he was like, "Yeah, well, son, I messed up." I'm like, "Well, I'm glad you're admitting it, but I'm a man of my word, unlike you.
Hmm.
I'm done. Like, I'm not putting up with it anymore." Like, how do you forgive somebody so many times and they keep making the same mistakes?
Hmm.
You got to draw a line somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for your
And like,
well-being, for your emotional, mental, spiritual, for all sorts of well-beings, you got to draw that line.
and man, like when my mom and dad got a divorce, I'll even like this was something that messed with me for a long time. Like I come home from my girlfriend's at the time, and he's like, "What'd you do with it? What'd you do with it?" Like I forget even what it was now, but he was accusing me of taking something of his, and he pushes me up against the wall and holds a knife to my throat. And I even forgave him for that as long as he was clean. That was
Wow.
not too much to ask.
Wow. Wow.
So, and I mean, I can even on more than that, man. It's just so needless to say, I had a messed up childhood. And I've heard from him one time since my son's been born, which I hate to say it, but I'm glad not to hear from him because I don't need that negativity in my life anymore.
I understand it. Yep. Yep.
And he calls me, like, I ain't going to go into the vulgar language that he says,
Mm-hmm.
but he literally tells me, I answer the phone, and I'll be honest, if I would have been paying attention, like, it was the very first time I left my wife and my son. Like, he was a couple weeks old, and it was the first time I left to go to the store. We was at my mother and father-in-law's, and it was her grandma's birthday, and I was going out to pick her grandma up a cake.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, my phone rings, and I just pick it up thinking, you know, it might be my wife or something may be wrong with the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, son." I'm like, "Oh, Lord, here we go." I'm like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I just want you to know, I hope your son hates you as much as you hate me, and I hope he effing dies."
No way.
And at that point, man, I lost it because, I mean, you don't say that to anybody. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but you don't say that about nobody's child or any child. And like the day before he called, we had just found out that there was a chance that our son had cystic fibrosis. So here we are, all emotionally drained and tore up, and then he goes there. And I'm just glad I wasn't around him, just to be honest.
So all of these negative experiences and the rough childhood that you had, how did that shape you to be the dad that you are right now and that you will become?
I want to be everything that he wasn't, and I just want to be there and show him what a good father was, or is, not was, because I plan on being there. But just to be there and to teach him everything that I can and be there every step of the way and be his rock to talk to.
It's a different. So when my wife told me that we were going to have a boy, I had two thoughts that crossed my mind. The first thought was, dang, I just lost $100. The second thought was, I'm going to be a father to a little boy. And so that got me thinking about my own upbringing. So my father was also there, but not there. Not in the same way that your dad was for you, or was not for you, better said. I can count on maybe a hand the number of clear memories that I have of my dad. So here's a little background about me, Kyle. I was born in South America, in Venezuela. And so that's where I lived for the first, a split between that and where my parents are from, which my parents are from Haiti. So the first 10 years of my life were split between Haiti and Venezuela. And the first clear memory that I have of my dad is when he showed up unannounced one weekend to visit us in Venezuela. I mean, literally, the man showed up on like a Thursday or Friday, and by Sunday, he was gone. Like, just like that. We had no idea he was coming. He just showed up, and then I can't even tell you what we did or what we didn't do during that weekend that he showed up. All I remember is that was the first time, that's the first clear memory that I have of seeing him and recognizing this man as my dad. All right. The second clear memory that I have of him is the one and only time he ever took me to the park so that I can play. And then we raced afterwards. And that was that. Like, that's probably the most positive memory that I have with my dad. And then some other things happened. He left my mom the whole time that my mom and my sisters and I were living in Venezuela. He was with another woman. So when we came to the United States, we lived with him for a little bit, but he never really let go of the other woman. And then he ended up leaving my mom twice, or like my sisters and I like to joke, he's left my mom multiple times. So he was kind of there, but my mom was both the man and the woman of the house. Like, she definitely wore the pants. And I can't really say that he contributed anything to my upbringing in any active way. So I never did sports or anything like that, although I wished I did. So I don't have any instances of him not showing up to my football game or basketball game or soccer game or anything like that. But he never really took time to find out what my interests were. He never really took time to find out what my hobbies were, like my talents, nothing. Like we never had any type of father-son conversation, nothing. Like as a 35-year-old man, I have no personal example of a conversation with my dad that would be classified as that typical, father-son conversation. Like I have a friend whose dad I've adopted as my dad. And the other day he was telling me that, he used to talk to his son about girls and about, just things. Just he was getting to know who his son was as a person. Man, my dad don't even know what I do, even now as a 35-year-old man. So I don't have any relationship with him. He's not in my life. When he walked out of our lives the last time, that was it. He told me that he made his decision and he was sticking to it. And that decision was to go right back to that lady that he was with. So, you know what I'm saying? It is what it is. But by watching everything that he wasn't, and it seems like that's what you're saying also, by watching everything that he wasn't, without knowing, I was making mental notes so that I was learning from his mistakes to be like, whenever I become a dad, this is the kind of father I want to be to my son. This is the kind of husband I want to be to my wife. An image completely different than what he was to my mom. And it sounds like that's what you're saying also.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which sucks in a way, if I can be quite honest. It sucks that it had to be that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we both would like to be calling and saying, hey, guess what your grandson's done, or guess what he's doing now.
Yeah.
But, it sounds like we're both better off, and it's made us who we are because we've learned from their mistakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And it's a much safer environment, not just for me, but for my son. My son's name is Julius Camillo, but I call him Juki for short. It's a safer world for me and for Juki to not have him around because he's hurt me way too many times. Dude, I remember when I lived in Florida, I was about 11, 12 years old, and he was living in New York. I was living in Florida with my uncle and his wife. And I remember one summer he promised that he was going to come visit us in Florida. He never showed up. And every time that we spoke on the phone and I would say to him, hey, are you coming? I remember the week that he said he was coming and he never showed up. Every day that week I called him. Hey, are you coming? How close are you? Are you coming? And he's like, yeah, one excuse after another, one excuse after another. And I remember that Friday that he said he was definitely going to come. That Friday came and went, and he never showed up. And he never gave a reason why he didn't come. It was always an excuse. So he hurt me far too many times. And it's sad. You can't teach an old dog new tricks for the most part. And so I wouldn't want that type of person around my son or on my family. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want that person around me. So it's better that he stays in his corner of the world and I stay in my corner of the world.
And a little saying is a toxic person releases toxins. And we don't need that.
So let me tell let me tell our listeners how you and I got to connect and the reason why we're having this conversation. The climate, the social climate that we're living in right now is a very crazy one. On top of COVID-19 and overall how 2020 has been, this civil unrest has been really revealing in a lot of ways. At least in my case, and you can speak to that if you want to. In my case, after having my son, Kyle, I have been finding myself telling Juki, who is only a month old, I'm already starting to have certain conversations with him that I should not be having with him. Now, clearly, he has zero recollection and he won't have any recollection of these conversations. But what is true is that between me and my son, it will be a lifetime of conversations that he and I will be having with regards to the reasons why our country is so uneasy right now when it comes to racial tensions. I'm a black man. I'm a black father. My son is going to be a young black man. You're a white man. You're a white father. Your son is going to grow up to be a young white man. And so it is my responsibility, and I believe your responsibility, if we are people of the right mindset, to raise our sons to be respectful and respectable citizens of not just this country, but of this world. And to also shape them in the best way possible so that they can be good people, just good human beings. So I came across Kyle because a friend of mine posted an article in which Kyle was featured as part of the story. The article talks about a tattoo parlor in Kentucky, where the owner of that tattoo place, wanting to do something positive to spread love, he decided to I guess put out an ad. I don't know if he did it. Did he do it on social media or how did he do it, Kyle?
Social media.
Okay, so he put it out on social media, basically saying that if anyone who has a racist tattoo on them that they want to have covered, to come to his spot and he would do it for free. And so why don't you go ahead and take the story from there and just tell our listeners how you responded to that.
So I'm just sitting on the couch going through, and I see the post on Facebook, and I'm like, is this real? And so I shoot him a message and a picture of it, and it was a Rebel Flag guitar from one of my favorite bands. And I'm like, hey, how much would you take to cover this, or just blacken it, or more or less just change the design of it, because I didn't want a Rebel Flag on me anymore, just because of the meaning. And not only just because of the meaning, I don't want it to be offensive to others. And when my son starts school, I didn't want him being like, okay, well, dad's got that, so it's okay to be racist, because it's not. Like, the world don't need any more of that at all. So anyways, I have a conversation with Matt, and he's like, yeah, man, he was like, definitely, we'll get that covered. Well, that night I'm laying in bed, and like my phone pings at 10 o'clock night, and he's like, so would you be cool with coming in at 10 in the morning? And I instantly reply, yeah. And he's like, by the way, the news is coming, if that's cool. I'm like, I was a little bit hesitant at first because I'm not one for public speaking. I don't like in front of a crowd. I don't like to more or less be the only one talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I can do this. And my wife gave me some encouragement. Like, she's my biggest supporter and encourager, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I couldn't ask for a better person to be my wife.
Shout out to you, April. Shout out, April.
So I go, and like, I really don't know what to expect. So he's like, okay, what are you thinking about the design? And I show him like just a different guitar, and he's like, yeah, man, I can do that. So he changed the design completely, and I couldn't be more thrilled with it just because of the imagery that what it was before with the rebel flag. And honestly, and I mean, it's terrible to say, like, I got the tattoo at 18, and like I said, it's still one of my favorite bands.
Mm-hmm.
But I never thought much about the rebel flag. And like, I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just going to put that on it. It's cool, whatever. And everything that's transpired in the world today, and like my wife and everything, conversations with her, it's just like, there's no need for that anymore. And, you know, people looks at that and perceives you as a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, for instance, if I walk by you in shorts with the rebel flag tattoo, I don't feel like, okay, well, he's racist. He don't like me.
100%.
And I just didn't want that in my life anymore. So that's the reason behind it. And then, so I do an interview just like more or less like on a phone, on a microphone. And the first one, news reporter was like, okay, well, would you actually like to be on camera? Would you like to give your name? I'm like, not really.
Mm-hmm.
So then another news reporter shows up like a couple minutes later, and I didn't really get to have a conversation with him at the time because, you know, Matt's already starting on the tattoo and stuff. So he, at that point, like, he's already recorded me a little bit, kind of got my face. So I'm just like, okay, well, you know what? If I do say something and maybe give my name, whatever, I might reach more people. I might change some people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Because where I'm at in Kentucky, I mean, man, I hate to say it, but I mean, there is racist people, and I'm sure there's racist people where you live, and there's a lot of rebel flags. And I've even got a couple people that's like backlash from it. Like, why would you get that covered? That don't mean anything. And people just need to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, that may not mean nothing to you, but it means something to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, can I ask you what was your view of it?
Of the Confederate flag? Oh,
yes.
Man. So I've had some soul searching moments in recent months, and a lot of things have become a lot clearer for me lately. Had you asked me this question, Kyle, 6 months ago, I would have probably given you a very superficial type answer. Because I myself, to be very honest, I didn't know or didn't realize, I should say, I hadn't really sat to dwell on the depth of what that flag symbolized. But now, because of the soul searching and my own looking into a lot of things, man, that flag represents an idea that me, because of my skin color, I am not worth anything to someone that has your skin color. That flag represents an entire outlook on the world that because I'm a black man, I am dispensable, I am disposable, I am nothing. And not just me, but by virtue my son, my wife, my nephews, my sisters, my family, and anyone who looks like me. The Confederate flag represents a period where people who looked like me had people who looked like me who sought to be treated and to be seen as human beings, people who had the audacity to want to be treated as human beings. That audacity was criminalized under people who held that flag up as a banner of their ideologies. So that flag doesn't represent anything good for me or my people. It represents hurt. It represents pain. It represents hatred. It represents a history of unspeakable injustices that my people have suffered at the expense of people who have your skin color.
And man, I just want to say I'm sorry. And I mean, like I said, I'm not racist, but I'm sorry that you've had to experience in that and your family. And like you were saying a minute ago about you've already began talking to your son about certain things and he's only a month old. And that is pathetic that we live in a world that you have to have those conversations with your son because of a skin color. Because last time I checked, we all bleed red.
One of the things that I've been saying to my son is that I make it a point to let him know how beautiful of a kid he is. My son is a cute kid. I make it a point to let him know how beautiful his skin color is because he has a very beautiful skin color. I make it a point to tell him that he is created in God's image. And he's a beautiful representation of God's image, that his mom and dad are also created in God's image, that people are created in God's image. Even people that may not like him are also created in God's image. And my appeal to him is don't ever grow up to have the audacity to hate someone because of the way they look or because they hate you. Because since we're all created in God's image, if you hate someone, you are in turn hating God's image, which means that you're hating yourself. And only a foolish person hates themselves. So that's the message that I've been sending, that I've been giving to my son so far at only 4 weeks old. And that's a message that I intend on passing along to him, for the rest of his life.
And hopefully with our kids and this next upbringing of this generation, the racism ends here because it needs to.
I do want to ask you a question. Going back a little bit to when you got the tattoo, the previous tattoo. Did you know what the Confederate flag meant when you were getting the tattoo? Did you give any thought to that when you were getting the tattoo of the guitar at 18?
Yes and no. Like, more or less in our area, it's just I was looking at it as, okay, I'm a rebel, and it's the heritage of the South and all that. So I never really put a whole lot of thought in it. And that's what I was saying about it. Kind of made me open my eyes with everything that's going on in the world today, about it being such a hateful image and everything. That's why I asked you, what was your thoughts on it? Because I wanted the raw truth. I didn't want it sugar coated. So, like I said, yes, I more or less put a little bit of thought in it, but I should have done more research to be like, okay, well, this is actually viewed to colored people as the same way a swastika is to Jewish people. And I mean, it's still, one's not better than the other, and it's pitiful. It really is.
Now, the next question I'm going to ask you may not be fair, but I feel like you've been honest with me and I've been honest with you, and I really enjoy everything that we've been able to share so far. So I'm going to take the risk and ask it anyway.
Go ahead, man. I'm completely open and to answer anything.
Okay, I appreciate that. Do you think that you would have gotten the tattoo reworked had you not had Eli?
Honestly, it's hard to answer just because, like I said, with everything going on. But I will say with him, it made me want to get it covered more, because it is viewed as hate. And I didn't want him being brought up that way. Is it's okay to hate someone else or because of the color or their sexual orientation. Like, that is not okay. So, honestly, I don't know how to answer that. I would hope that I would have, but I mean, I can't say for sure either way, because Eli has shaped me into a better person. Like, I'm not saying that I was Mr. KKK walking around, I don't like black people or anything like this, because one of my really good friends is actually, he lives in Ohio now, but he was, I believe, originally from the Bronx in New York, and he's black. And I think the world of him, one of the best people you'll ever meet. But, and like, that's what you said a minute ago, just about what it meant to you seeing that. Like, that bothers me that people is okay with that.
Did you have the tattoo then when you were still in Ohio? Did you get the tattoo in Ohio or in Kentucky?
In Ohio, and I got it when I was 18 years old. But that friend of mine that I was talking about in Ohio, we're still currently friends, and we actually just met probably 5 years ago at a concert in Louisville. And he's seen it, but he never really said anything about it, so I don't really know his true feelings about it. And I would love to have this conversation with him now, to be like, man, you ain't going to hurt my feelings. Like, I've stayed at his house, and he's welcome at mine anytime. Like, I love him to death. He's family. And I'll just be honest. If somebody was to say something racist to him, like, I'd be standing up for him. Like, I don't tolerate that, and nobody should.
What I found striking and fascinating in your story while Matt was covering up your tattoo was the reason why you decided to do it, because of your son. And I'm not someone who gets all mushy and emotional about looking for silver linings or looking for, some hopeful conclusion to a really messed up story. But the moment I read that, I looked over at my wife and I said, I'm going to reach out to the person who owns this tattoo parlor, and I'm going to ask him if he could get me in touch with this Kessler guy, because I want to talk to him about that right there, that he saw the world through the eyes of the type of world that he wants his son to be a part of. Like, to me, what struck me was that you had this tattoo at 18, and now that you're 29 years old, so what, 11 years, for 11 years, you kind of you had no real incentive to cover it up or to think about it in a different way. Correct me if I'm wrong. No incentive to really be like, this might convey the wrong message. I'm not saying that you never had that. What I'm saying is the impetus that your son, that Eli's presence, his birth, seeing this bundle of joy, seeing this piece of you on the outside now gives you, is something that you didn't have during those 11 years. But now, because you do have it, you're like, wait a minute, this is not the type of man I want my son to grow up thinking that I am. And this is not the type of example that I want to give to my son. In a way, what I'm saying is, you have done something for your son already that, honestly, bro, your dad has never done for you. And that's the reason why I wanted to bring you onto this podcast, to be able to talk about that. Because fatherhood, it seems to me that fatherhood is already bringing out a much better version of you, in spite of the things and the experiences that you've had with your dad. Have you ever considered that?
Kind of choked me up a little bit saying that I've already done more for my son, because that's one of my biggest goals, is to just be the best dad and be more to my son than my dad was to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that when I read the article, that thought became so clear to me until now that I'm saying it. But now that I'm putting my finger on it, that's what I was able to pick up from that, without knowing your background, without knowing anything about you. But the fact that in the article it explicitly said, because you explicitly said, I have a 3-month-old now. I guess when you got it done, Eli was only 3 months old. And you said, I have a
Yes.
3-month-old now. And I don't want him growing up looking at me thinking that I'm racist and that I'm a bad person. And it was just a simple line. But to me, that was everything. To me, that was absolutely everything. So to finish the story, so once that article came out and I read it, and I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I reached out to Matt on Facebook, told him how great of a job and how great of a thing he's doing. And I took a leap of faith and I asked him if he could reach out to you. And he got back to me on Saturday and said that he would. When I opened my Facebook Messenger, I saw that he had responded on Saturday, and he said that he would. And I also saw your message both on Facebook and also in the email that I had given Matt to pass on to you. And honestly, I was so excited. I mean, my wife and I were talking, and she was in the middle of telling me something, and I was just like, babe, he got back to me. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like, the guy, Kyle Kessler, he got back to me. And I was excited. I was really excited when you decided to respond to my attempt at making contact with you, to be able to talk about this. I was really excited when we spoke on the phone prior to this conversation. I am even more excited now that we're having this conversation. And yeah, man, I just want to commend you for the work that you are doing already in your world. And I mean that by meaning in that piece of world that is entirely you and entirely your wife, whose name is Elijah. You are doing a great job in this young man, at least in this small window that you've allowed me and everybody else to look through. And that a decision, a pretty significant decision that you took there to have that tattoo covered up and redone in a different way. I thank you for doing that. And yeah, just want to emphasize again, bro, I think that you have already done much more for your son than your father had done for you in your life. And if that's one of the first major things that you've done for your son, you can only build on that. So I need you to make me a promise that tonight you're going to sit in that realization while you're holding your son, and just let that, just soak in that for a little bit, because it's worth spending some time acknowledging that.
You don't know how much I appreciate that, because, and I'm sure your wife, your family, and stuff like that, people says you're a great dad. Well, you kind of wonder, are they just saying that? But to hear those words and what I'm getting out of what you're saying, dude, that just means so much to me.
Thank you so much for joining me in this journey. If you haven't done so already, go to Facebook to follow the Welcome to Fatherhood podcast Facebook page. Make sure you like the page and share it with your friends. Also, you can leave comments on there. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you did not like. Feel free to share your own stories. Leave us a comment. Also, subscribe to the Welcome to Fatherhood podcast, wherever you podcast. Remember that as dads, we're really just like moms, except we're dads. Talk to you next week.